When we get back to the bedroom that night, I can immediately tell that Hieronymous is expecting me to explode by how quietly he shuts the door behind him. Fortunately for him, I have absolutely no intention of doing so. I didn't know half as much about the magical world that I needed to, but I would never get any answers if I isolated Hieronymous from me. We should get to bed, I say, after it's clear he's not going to be the one to speak first. We've had a long day, and we don't have much time left in our Christmas vacation. Hopefully, now that your father has said that he'll leave us alone for the rest of the holiday, we'll actually be able to enjoy it. If that's what you want, he offers, but he seems confused. I would have thought you'd want to talk about everything we've discussed tonight. No, I just shrug my shoulders as I climb into bed. Just like with Damien, there are things that you don't tell me because I don't need to know. I've already learned that trying to force you to answer me isn't going to get me anywhere. Tori, Hieronymus's voice sounds frustrated, and if I'm not mistaken, a little hurt. I never know when is the proper time to say it so that you'll really hear me, but I love you. I really love you. Please understand that while I can be hesitant to reveal certain information to you, it is only because I care about how you perceive me. I am well aware of my shortcomings, and I do not wish them to tarnish my relationship with you in any way. This was surprisingly vulnerable of him, and as I watch him standing awkwardly at the foot of the bed, I can't help but relent. How long have you known that your father was stealing magic juice from expelled wild seeds to stay alive? I've always known, Hieronymus replies. It was something I grew up knowing, that he used magic taken from expelled individuals in order to fuel himself. I didn't find out how he acquired it until much later. Does he take it from magical-born families or just wild seeds? I ask. I don't know, Hieronymus replies. It's not really a topic I care to dwell on. I know how unsavory it sounds, but you must know, Tori, that there is a certain benefit to depriving expelled individuals of their magic. If they perform magic accidentally, someone could get hurt. It could risk our discovery. Depriving them of something they cannot use does not harm them in any way. I suppose not, I offer. But it doesn't seem to be very fair to wild seeds. Potsdam is setting them up to fail for a reason. I'm guessing Minnie knows about it too, otherwise she wouldn't be so insistent on trying to protect wild seeds now and in the future if her political career takes off. I don't agree with what Potsdam is doing, Hieronymus says immediately, as if that wasn't something I hadn't figured out for myself. When students come to Iris Academy, their safety should be guaranteed, and they should be provided with the tools to navigating the magical world before they're taught how to cast spells. I know, I remind him. I agree with you. I heard what you said to Potsdam the night of the dark dance, when that snake girl could have been really hurt because she didn't know any better. There's survival of the fittest, and then there's leading someone into a bear cave to see if they'll fight the bear or run. So, you're not mad at me? Hieronymus asks softly, and I shake my head. I'm not mad, I say slowly, drawing out the last word. I'm just confused, I think. I know some magical people have really strong opinions on the subject, but I've never asked you how you feel about wild seeds. Hieronymus looks taken aback. Tori, you were raised as a wild seed. For all intents and purposes, when I met and married you, I thought you were a wild seed. It wasn't until after we had already set a foundation to our relationship did we find out about your mother. Surely my actions here must give you some clarity on the matter. And he clears his throat. As much as I don't want to bring up her name here, of all places, I feel compelled to remind you that Violet was a wild seed as well. So she was, I say, trying to ignore the sinking feeling in my chest every time he says her name. Did you kill her? I didn't mean to ask that. And I certainly didn't mean to use those words to ask the question. It had just sort of slipped out. Hieronymous visibly draws back from me, as if I had reached out and slapped him with my words. What? He demands. Tori, what would compel you to ask such an insane question? Daniel has talked to me about the rumors, I say, finally deciding to just get it all out in the open now. Even his parents don't know what really happened, but they refer to you as Hieronymous Grabiner. Full name, that Grabiner. No one knows what really happened over there, you know. You told me that she was attacked, but other people think that you had a fight, and you either accidentally or on purpose used magic to kill her, and then your father covered up the whole thing. That's why you left, right? You didn't leave to let the whole thing blow over. You left because you were angry that you weren't being held accountable for your actions. That's why you went to teach at a school and devoted your life to stop other students from doing stupid stuff that would mess up the rest of their lives. At least, until you met me. How? Hieronymous swallows hard. How long have you been keeping these thoughts from me? Since the summer, I say, thinking back. Since meeting Daniel, it was one of the first things he asked me, if I could trust you. I told him he could. You slept beside me every night for the past 6 months, thinking that it was possible that I killed my previous paramour in cold blood? Hieronymous is incredulous. No, I snap, and I can't help but sound annoyed by the insinuation. No, I don't think that. We both know how quickly rumors can spiral out of control, and I don't believe that you would ever kill someone intentionally. Maybe you let your magic get out of control. Maybe. But I believe what you told me. You don't tell me things, sure, but you don't outright lie to me. Hieronymous just shakes his head from side to side. You were right. We shouldn't be having this conversation. We should go to bed. There is one last thing, I venture, and although Hieronymous looks exhausted when he turns back to me, I decide to press on. The memory spells that you're doing for Potsdam. What's that all about? Hieronymous just shakes his head. A story for another time. Fair enough, I say as I plop down into the pillows. Please come to bed soon. I think we could both use a hug. Hieronymous was frustrated. Again, although that in itself was nothing new. He hated, absolutely hated, how his father seemed to be making a game of trying to turn Tori against him. It was his biggest fear, but it was starting to become clear that Tori really wasn't going to leave him. She was young yet. For all intents and purposes, she should go on to find someone else, someone her own age, who wasn't tied down by complicated family drama. He was powerful, and he was wealthy, but Tori didn't seem interested in either of those things. In fact, when he had asked her only a few short weeks ago, she had told him that his sense of humor was one of the things she loved most about him. He didn't understand how, but then again, Tori seemed to see a side of him that even he didn't see in himself. Even still, she had apparently been entertaining the notion that he had murdered Violet in his youth, and yet that wasn't so egregious of a sin that it would cause her to leave him, or even confront him about it. Sure, she had believed it wasn't true, and it wasn't, but he had provided so few details about that horrid affair that it was possible that someone like Tori, who always entertained every hypothetical she could think of, to at least consider that it was a possibility. It wasn't fair that he was keeping so much from her, and it made sense why Tori felt compelled to keep so much from him in return. He was setting a terrible example for her, but he couldn't help himself. A part of him still saw her as a child that needed to be watched over and protected. She had shown him time and time again that she was mature and capable in her own right, and yet he seemed staunchly determined to assume that he knew best. Was it their age difference? Was it the fact that she was a student and he was her professor? Was it the fact that she had been born a wild seed? He had never really thought that his prejudices had colored his reactions to her, and yet he had given her 10 demerits the first time he had bumped into her in the quad on the first day of classes. He still remembered his first thought as he recorded the demerits in his book, thinking that she was just another wild seed who wouldn't be around for long. If she had been magical born, would he still have had that thought? Would he have still given her those demerits? He couldn't say. Honestly, he felt like a different person from the person Tori had first met. He wasn't foolish enough to think that she had changed him, but she did allow him to challenge himself without fear of losing what he had come to covet most. It was like Tori saw him for who he really was, and nothing he did would ever shake her steady resolve in him. He felt secure in that belief, although he honestly couldn't say exactly what Tori had done to make him so confident in this notion. He just knew that as long as Tori was around, his life would be better for it. He had never hated that as much as he did right now. He couldn't be sure why, but he was starting to understand that if he lost Tori, he lost everything, and he couldn't live with that hanging over him. He couldn't let one person become his everything. Not again. He had let Violet become his everything, and when she had died, he thought his life ceased to matter. It was quickly becoming apparent that that was exactly how he felt about Tori as well, and as much as he didn't want things between them to change, they had to. He would never be able to protect her if he found himself so wound up in her, and she would never be free to truly grow on her own terms if he constantly kept watch over her shoulder. Maybe she should go away to boarding school. Their relationship didn't necessarily need to end, but they needed perspective, both of them. This couldn't be a conversation he could have now either. She would just assume that something his father had said had gotten into his head, and she'd hardly be wrong to think that way. He didn't want to be entertaining these thoughts, these doubts, and yet here they were, picking him apart from the inside out. He let out a sigh as he closed his eyes and tried to fall asleep beside her. Sleep wasn't going to come easily tonight, and he almost wished that they were back at Iris Academy already. The bed was smaller, the mattress less comfortable, but it's where he had slept for the past 10 years, and it had become something that felt like home to him. It felt familiar. It felt safe. Everything with Tori was challenging and new, and maybe that's suddenly why he was having these doubts. He had grown accustomed to surrendering his life to the cycles of the academic calendar year, and now, who knew what his future consisted of? Uncertainty. Some people could live in that abeyance of not knowing what the future would bring, but unfortunately, Hieronymous Grabiner was not one of those people. The question was, could he learn to be? He just wasn't sure.